You are listening to Survival Stories with Jackie. Welcome, survival warriors. If you are a victim or survivor of trauma, then you're in the right place. In this show, we'll explore the extreme strength displayed by victims of trauma as they journey through life to the survival pinnacle. My name is Jackie, and I am so grateful to be here today to share my survival with you. Here is this survival story. Let's dig deep. Welcome, survival warriors, to this week's episode of Survival Stories. Today, I have a very good friend of mine, Julie Hodges Armstrong. Trust me to mess it up straight away. Julie is a fabulous teacher today. She is always smiling, always willing to help, and has developed a great, actually groundbreaking, I think, learning program for new readers called Word Works Wonders. Is that correct, Julie?
Yes, Word Work Wonders. Yeah.
So, without messing up my words and fumbling anymore, I'm going to hand you over to Julie, who's going to introduce herself and tell you what makes her so fabulous today. Julie, over to you.
Hi, as Jackie mentioned, my name's Julie Armstrong, and I actually just completed my 26th year of teaching. I'm a public school teacher in the US, but I wanted to hop on and share a little bit about my journey as to how I evolved into a teacher, and more specifically, why my specialty is to work with kids who are struggling readers and writers. And typically I'll work with children that fall anywhere from a year or more below grade level to standards. So I have a certain soft spot, so to speak, and a connection with kids that struggle with confidence and motivation. And I have a little backstory that explains why I think I connect so well to these kids.
You shouldn't underestimate yourself. You have a little backstory. I'm excited to hear your backstory, actually, because it's clearly one that has developed into something great today. So I'm sure it's powerful. The place that we start, though, I'd like you to take us to the saddest, the darkest point, the point where you knew that something had to change, something had to be done to take control of your life.
So I struggled a lot with confidence in my life from a child growing up. And I had a really difficult time expressing myself. So actually just sharing my thoughts, my ideas. And I also was very self-conscious about my appearance. And I developed eating disorders around that time. It started with skipping meals, and then I went into bulimia. And I actually had that problem for the majority of my high school years, until I actually was able to get help for that. So one of the things that I discovered along the way, I struggled I was not necessarily a straight A student. I had average grades, but I did have difficulty with, especially in the math area, with some areas in writing as well. And I wasn't necessarily a super athletic person either. So I think that affected my confidence quite a bit. And I knew that writing was never my strength or forte either. But what I really discovered with the eating disorders, and especially with the bulimia, that I had problems with expressing myself and learning how to share my feelings and have the confidence to know that it was okay to express myself, to take a step out and know that my ideas had some meaning behind them.
I think that's quite, you can quite understand that feeling building up, because high school has that way of doing that to you. If you're not one of the cool kids, you know, you tend
That's
to
true.
think that there's something wrong with you, not something wrong with the cool kids. You know?
Right. And although I had a lot of creativity, even as a young child, and my parents were very supportive and they fostered that creativity, that wasn't necessarily one of the cool things in high school as well. So I never really actually showed that creative side to me. I always felt like it was more important that as a cheerleader and one of the gals on the top, I had to be a certain weight and look a certain way. And even with academics, I felt like I always needed to have straight A's, even though I knew my mom and stepdad understood my situation, that I wasn't necessarily the straight A student that my sister was, but there wasn't necessarily, I put that pressure on myself, I think. And I would hold a lot of feelings in. I think I just always lacked the confidence to really share that. So I think it was my friends approaching me and explaining that they thought I had a problem. And then I actually had some issues with a couple of teeth that I think that all clicked in, that I needed help and I needed to get help, that I had a problem. And of course, that's kind of hard to admit when you're in your teenage years.
I was going to say, did you, when they said that to you, did you just accept it, or did you say, who, you know, like, who, me? Or
Yes, definitely a who me at first. And then they explained, they did their research and they gave examples. And then I think once I got past the who me, I had to realize that there was, in fact, a problem, that I did have a problem. And so then that was the difficult discussion I had with my mom. And then I, obviously got some help after that to work through that. So what I discovered from the help that I received was that in the first stages, it starts off with how you look, self-image. But when I dug deeper, I realized it was because of the way I processed my feelings, the lack of confidence that I had with school, with writing. I was always an avid reader, but writing was my struggle. And then even with the way people would perceive me, I always felt very timid to share my ideas. And I had to work through that. It's taken years and a lot of help actually from my brother to even get to where I am now with the business, and even here with you talking about this. I had another incident, for instance, in college. I was taking a British literature course, and I was also taking an additional writing course, and I believe it was my sophomore year of college. And I had about an A or a B with the British literature teacher. He was really tough, but I found him fascinating, and I always loved British literature. But the writing course I struggled with. Kudos, right? I love my British literature. So the writing course I struggled with, and I went in to get some help. I wrote a paper that my teacher just shredded, the red pen comments all over. So I went to visit her during her office hours, and my roommate was standing outside the door, and she just didn't really have many nice things to say at all. She asked me how I could ever have graduated from high school with my writing skills. And that really stung. And then she recommended buying a computer that would check my grammar and spelling. And at that point, that was back in the 90s when those computers were thousands of dollars. I didn't have that kind of money. So I explained that to her, and I walked out just completely deflated. That line about how could you have ever graduated with your writing skills, just, it was almost the equivalent of like stepping on a bug and just squashing it. I just felt shattered.
Julie, just hold for me a minute, please. I'm just going to take a pause.
Does your child have trouble learning how to read and write? Do they struggle to remember words, letters, or sounds? Do they have trouble understanding what they read? Do they dislike reading and writing? Do you struggle for ideas for curriculum? If so, it's okay. Don't worry. You're not alone. Many programs that teach reading and writing rely on ineffectual and broken ideas. They use drilling and worksheets and teaching to standardized tests. I've taken my 24 years of teaching experience and I've built activities based on your child's strengths, imagination, creativity, and love of play. It's easy to learn, easy to use, and best of all, it works. Check us out and follow us at Word Work Wonders on Facebook.
Okay, Julie, we were up to the point where you were talking about the way that the teacher made you feel by her cruel comments, whether they were meant to be cruel or constructive, which I can't personally see myself, but I'm trying to find a nice way of describing this. Can we take it from there? Because that, by then, had you taken control of the bulimia, or did it?
I did actually take control of the bulimia at that point. I think, and even my roommates knew, I was comfortable talking to them about that. So I think even they were a little worried that I might, struggle through this. So it took about a year of really digging in and realizing I had a problem to overcome that part of it. With some people, it's definitely much more intense, or it may take a lot longer. Sadly, some people don't recover from it. So I feel pretty fortunate, and I was pretty dedicated to working through that part of my problem with the eating disorders. The confidence still took a lot longer to work through. So I felt like when that teacher made that comment, it just took the wind out of my sails. My roommates were very upset. My one roommate was just appalled that she spoke to me that way. I thought she was going to come through the door, but she helped me through that semester. She would proofread my papers for me, work on some of the editing, and I almost felt like that was, once I got over the initial shock of that comment, it really sort of spurred me on. And I remember thinking I would never, ever want to make anyone, whether it was a young child or an adult, ever feel that way. I think that was what my driving force was. I was going to prove to her that I could write a really good paper, and that I was worthy of having graduated high school and to be in college.
She should never make you feel that way,
Oh, it was terrible. Now, I was also, some people can brush off comments. I am just the kind of person, I absorb a lot of what people say and feel. That's just always been my personality. So that was difficult, but I think my roommates sort of helped me, sort of the saying, fill your bucket. They would fill my bucket and help me through that semester. And I remember I wound up, I guess, flash forward 2 years later, I graduated with my undergraduate and I stayed on to get my master's degree at that college.
Okay.
And I passed her on campus and I stopped her. She didn't remember me, but I made a point to stop her and to say, you don't remember me, but you once told me that I probably shouldn't have graduated. And I repeated the comment to her, high school, with my writing skills. And I said, I just want you to know that I graduated and received my undergraduate degree, and I'm actually working for a couple of professors here at the college and getting my master's degree. And she was a little startled. She couldn't remember. I don't think she even remembered saying it, but that was sort of my, I'm going to stand up to this and I'm going to overcome someone's words and this confidence thing that I
Could we
have.
just take a step back a minute?
Sure.
Do you recall the first time that you realized that there was a confidence issue in you? Do you recall when that was? You know, because you've said it was in high school. Was there a
Yes.
particular trigger, if anything, that you can think of that got you?
Yes, I would probably say when I realized it was 8th grade. I had a lot of anxiety about going, well, actually in middle school, I realized that I had a lot of self-esteem issues. And then rolling into high school, I realized the confidence issue, because I would just be so nervous. Even though I was a cheerleader, I never felt like I really had I had friends from all different circles and all different types of people, but I never really felt like I had necessarily a place. I always lacked confidence, even in the way I would carry myself, walk in the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really started in middle school and then increased in high school. So.
Did no teachers at that point pick you up on it or anything? Because I'm not that clear on how classrooms work in the States, but I know as a classroom teacher here, I always, would keep an eye out for those kids who, try and sort of just be there, but not there, and I make a point of really making a fuss of them so that they realize they've got lots to give, as much as anybody else, and even more,
I did have one teacher in high school that I'll never forget her. She actually was my writing teacher, ironically enough, and it was creative writing. And I remember I was terrified to walk into this class because I knew that my writing skills, even before college, I knew that my writing skills were weaker than others. And so I was very nervous walking in. And I remember one of our first assignments, she decided that we were going to write just a passage about a spy, just a scene from a spy scene. So she came into school with a trench coat on and this hat, and she played that Secret Agent Man song from, I think it was like the 70s. And she ran around the classroom singing the song while we were writing. And it just automatically, it took all the anxiety and the nervousness that I was feeling, and she brought it down to where I remember thinking, okay, this class is not going to be that bad. She has a sense of humor. I think she knew exactly what the students needed. I think she probably understood that a lot of us were not excited about taking a writing course, and she was going to do her part to make it exciting and fun. And I'll probably remember her name until my last breath, because she definitely saw something in me. I think she knew right away that I had nervousness about it. So, and it's funny that I remember that teacher in high school, but I think a lot of people have, several handfuls of teachers. So
Mine's Miss Carabin.
Now, what did Miss Carabin?
Miss Carabin, in many ways, saved my life because she was so feisty. She was tiny, but she was scary. You know,
Oh.
she was a real socialist, feminist, everythingist type of person. You know, she challenged the system at all times. And I can still see her today walking down the corridor towards me on this particular day and say, "Where are you going?" You know, she's so much smaller because I'm 1 inch off 6 foot.
Oh, okay.
And she was like 5 foot nothing. But you should never doubt her power. And she was the one that took me under her wing and, you know, sort of changed the narrative on my story quite substantially. So I always believe there's one guardian angel of a teacher somewhere in every building. And when I say one, I know there's many, but
Yes, yes. But I think every kid should at least have one that makes a difference.
It changed the way that I teach, because when I was in schools, I would always have an open door policy, you know. And I have a special love for kids who with learning difficulties or with, you know, anxiety, or with who just don't want to be outside today.
Right.
And, you know, they'd come and say, "Miss, can I sit in here?" Of course you can. Sit down. Do you want to talk? If you don't want to talk, that's all right. I'll just sit here quietly. And, you know,
Right.
you've got to remember that kids are only small people, young people. They're not robots.
Right. And I would like to mention, even to parents, as I tell my story, a lot of times we think that if kids have anxiety about issues, or if they're lacking confidence or motivation, I think a lot of times parents want to blame themselves. I know as a parent, I'm constantly thinking, did I say that correctly? Did I handle this situation correctly? Especially as we're entering the teenage and young adult years in my household here. I'm always thinking and rethinking my decisions, but sometimes kids just develop. I would say that my mom and stepdad did everything right as far as how they raised us. It was something that I had to work through myself. It was not something that anyone could do or fix for me. Because I don't know about you, I'm a fixer. I like to fix everything and make everything better, right? And sometimes I think that's probably the hardest part about parenting, is that we have to try to equip our kids and give them the right messages and to build that confidence at a young age. But sometimes there are some things that your kids have to work through themselves with your support, but.
Absolutely, the support's always going to be there, but it helps them in the long term.
Yes.
Know, if you just give it take a step back a little bit, but let them know you're there. If they fall, you're going to pick them up.
It's sort of like riding a bike with the first time off of the training wheels, and you're there to help them balance, but then you know at some point you've got to take a few steps back and let them, you know, do the pedaling and take it on themselves. So I would say to parents to try not to beat themselves up if they're going through any, you know, problems with confidence or motivation, that sometimes it's something you have to find what works, and sometimes it takes time. But
well, you had quite a little journey there, because if you've got a potential eating disorder that could come back, and the confidence issue that's there, and the risk of people triggering one or the other, that's quite a lot, Julie. You know, you shouldn't devalue your strength that you've had to go through. Never do that.
Well, I do think there was a lot of inside, even though kids may struggle with confidence like I did, and I struggled with confidence. I think that's where the parenting with my parents came through, about the perseverance. And even when you're upset or things aren't working quite right. You've just got to keep getting in there and trying and trying. My stepdad was a coach, so he was very well versed and persevering. And I think that's really what, when things got really difficult for me, it was the ability to just have that mental talk with myself, to keep picking up the pieces and pushing through and looking towards the future. And I think that's actually how I became a teacher. I remember at that moment just thinking, I want to work with young kids. I knew I loved reading, and that was how I developed my journey to working with young kids. And that's actually what I specialize in, kids that have learning, maybe it's not undiagnosed learning disabilities, kids that are struggling, kids that have motivation or confidence issues. That's my passion. That's
and
my
it's a
goal.
very worthy passion, because they need our help. They need our understanding. And
Yes.
I'm going to take a break there. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Hi, this is Jackie, and you've been listening to one of my friends tell their stories today. I invite my friends to tell their stories to help you heal. If you do have any trauma or any difficulties that you think we could help you with, please visit my website, JacquiandFriends.com, and leave a message or contact me, and I'll be happy to connect you with either today's friend or anyone else who you've listened to or watched who you think might be able to help you further. Or if you just want to talk to me, that's great too. And we're back now. Julie's told us a fascinating story so far, but what I'd like, and she's told us about the support from her parents. But Julie, what could you tell us a bit about, you've mentioned a brother and a sister.
Yes. So, oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, how do they fit into your story?
So I am very close with my brother and my sister, so close with my brother that we actually own Word Work Wonders together. So Mike is a big part of my life. We talk quite frequently about the business and family. He's the oldest, and he was always sort of the protective big brother, because he wouldn't want me to maybe say his age, but there's an age gap between my brother, my sister, and I. My sister and my brother are within just a couple of years apart from each other. And then I was always the baby of the family. So I have a close relationship with both of them. I think my sister is sort of one of the people behind the scenes that is constantly lifting me up. And my brother was the one that actually convinced me to take my ideas and turn it into a business.
Sorry, go ahead.
I actually wrote stories that I thought I could use for my students to help them with understanding phonics. And I was showing Mike my books that I had just, in a Word document. And these are things that I'm thinking about getting published. And that's sort of how the whole business idea developed.
And just in the interests of transparency, I am aware of Mike Hodges, and he is a phenomenal man.
He is.
He actually glows when he talks about you.
Oh, that's nice to know. We still love each other after all these years.
So tell us a bit about how your program works.
So our program is designed to work with kids that are just learning how to read, beginning readers. And we work through to, right now we're developing courses for up to about 4th grade. What is different about the program that we've developed at Word Work Wonders, I've taken my knowledge from my 26 years of teaching, and I had some of the, in my opinion, the best reading training that is around in the world, called Reading Recovery. And one of the fundamental components of that program is that you get to know the child, you get to know their strengths, and you build from, it's always working with what they know. So meeting them where they're at and moving them forward. But the way I was trained is to involve a lot of senses. And if you look at brain research and recommendations, and even from the Dyslexic Association, they recommend that kids have multisensory activities, or activities, a lot of people call them hands-on, but that you're activating all of the senses. And I've actually, before I started the business, I was doing a lot of studying with neuroscience and what they've discovered with teaching and recommended practices. And the research actually supports that. So that's really the philosophy of what we have with our business. We think that in order to have kids that are confident and love reading and writing and enjoy it, they need to have fun. So we have puppet skits with little songs and raps that teach certain phonics skills. And then we have ideas to work with letters or to write words in shaving cream. And we just have lots of different multisensory activities, but everything stems around reading and writing. So if you're teaching a skill, a lot of companies will teach a skill and they'll sort of drill it. We like to tie it back into reading. So if they learn a skill, then they're going to see that in a book that they're reading. And then they're going to write a sentence using that skill, but something in their own words. I feel like if it's authentic, then it's meaningful to them. And I found that really keeps kids excited about learning. If you make it more like a play scenario, it's almost like you're tricking them into thinking they're playing, but they're really learning, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, it does. What about, how does that link to their early writing then?
So the way I was trained is that reading and writing really connect together. So let's say we're teaching a child how to write, it could be a sight word, a word that they can't sound out. They would have to learn, we'd have them make it and write it, read it in a book and use it in a sentence so they can see how this one little skill, you need to know this for reading and you're going to use this for writing as well. Because sometimes I think when kids are just learning skills and it's not always connected in that way, they don't understand the connection. Kids can be kind of concrete. And so sometimes you just need to show them how things work, how it all comes together, so to speak.
This is actually, it's really interesting because it shows what a good foundation can do. And I know there are a lot of adults who still have difficulty reading or even interpreting because they were never taken through that connection there. And that way to create context out of something so they can decode,
right.
But decoding isn't necessarily reading, understanding, or developing your creativity from it. Do you think that your program would be useful, or have you ever thought of creating an adult version?
I would love to. I think where I initially received my ideas, and I've had a lot of talk about this, but the way I grew up, someone asked me once, how did you learn how to read? And I had to think about it. I don't really remember a particular process, but what I do remember is I loved Sesame Street and The Electric Company and Schoolhouse Rocks. And I actually learned quite a bit through Sesame Street, The Electric Company. But I also feel like for adults, if there was a way that you could use the same system. I just think it's so important because every learner has a different strength. So we're not all the same. One person may need to see something visually to understand it. One person may need kind of to write things out or be more kinesthetic in how they learn. So I think if you include a combination of styles like what we're doing with the younger kids, it helps. I did teach a class at our community college for students that didn't pass the entry-level exam, and it was sort of a remedial class. And that was one of the activities that I would do for vocabulary. I'd find visual pictures that would help them make that connection to the word. That's just one example, but recognizing that not everyone's going to be able to learn from flashcards or from drilling, that you have to kind of mix it up. And if you know someone that's musical or that they connect musically, then that's another way to tie in learning. I feel like music is one of the most powerful ways to learn. So that's something that I would love to tackle in the future, is taking that concept.
I was just thinking from the point of view, as survivors, we like to help other survivors and be able to help people with whatever difficulties they have. And you have come through, as a champion. So what advice would you give? I'm going to take you to the way that you managed your eating disorder now. What advice would you give to somebody who was struggling with the eating disorder side of things?
I would say, gosh, there's a few things I think that are important to remember. To know, I think there's a misconception that a lot of people think that it is completely about image. I would say to dig deep and find out what your trigger points are, because I think you first have to develop not just an awareness that there's a problem, but I would actually keep a journal. And I discovered that my trigger points were if something happened that was stressful for me and I didn't know how to respond to it, that would trigger a moment for me, and that I needed help working through how to process if there's a problem. And a lot of times it may even be calling my mom or talking to my sister or talking to a friend or a roommate and working through how I could process something. So if you have identifying what the triggers are, what causes the events to occur, and then developing a plan for, I know it sounds very trivial, but finding out who your support network can be. I was blessed because I did have several friends and family that helped me along through it. But I think that's really key.
That's not trivial. That's so key, if anything.
It is key. And I also think that there needs to be an openness. I know back when I had eating disorders, it was sort of a taboo thing that people wouldn't talk about eating disorders or suicide or depression. It was almost, one of those things that it was too taboo to discuss.
Sure.
And I think breaking down those barriers and having open discussions, and that applies for not just eating disorders, but even if it's someone struggling with depression or suicidal attempts. And the only way to improve that is to really have open discussions with people that you value, that will support you. That would be my best recommendation. So if it's a parent who has a child in that situation, really making sure you have those deep conversations is really key, and just problem solving.
And would you make a similar recommendation for confidence issues and the other side of your story?
I would absolutely, and I think sometimes problems go hand in hand, and I often say to teachers when we're looking at kids that have reading problems, sometimes it's like peeling back layers of an onion. Sometimes there can be many layers, but the one thing that I would recommend to parents, if their child's struggling with confidence, just keep at it, keep building, reinforcing, trying to make things enjoyable, whether it's washing the car or doing schoolwork or homework or going on a trip. You can have teachable moments that are still fun.
Yeah, that's been even more important in the last few months, really, hasn't it?
I think so. And I do think I can almost see and hear the stress. I did virtual lessons for the first time, and the one thing that was really powerful that I forgot, I'm trying to develop these great lesson plans on limited resources and trying to, meet all the needs of the kids in the group. And they really just wanted to talk. One girl was so excited. Her parents got little plants. They were going to grow a garden. And she wanted to show me her garden. And then all the kids wanted to share something. And I realized what's more important is the connecting and that sense of belonging. It really took me back to my childhood. I think sometimes we want to make sure everything's in place.
Yeah.
The academics are in place, the sports are in place, and we forget that sometimes they just need to connect.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Julie.
Well, thank you.
That's been a great wander through your life, through the background to your story. And I look forward to hearing more about word work
wonders.
Word works wonders.
It's a tongue twister.
Somebody just slapped me. I need to shine the spotlight on you a little bit now. And I'm going to ask you, do you prefer sneakers or high heels?
Oh, sneakers. Most definitely.
Are you vegetarian?
I am not.
Chicken or beef?
We
or
eat
lamb
a
or
lot of.
pork, I suppose I should take it there.
We eat a lot of chicken in our house, but I love beef. So.
Nothing like a good steak, is there?
Nothing like a good steak. Or a good steak and cheese, right? We have to make it on a smaller scale.
And dresses or jeans?
Well, that's tricky because I do love a comfortable pair of jeans, but right now it's so hot that I'm in dresses. So I guess that depends on the weather.
My daughter has an aversion to dresses, which I'm sure I developed in her because I loved dressing her in dresses because she was so cute.
Oh, so she loves dresses too?
I love dresses. She loves jeans. So I'm always wondering, is it me? Is it her? Is it all
or a little bit of her and you?
A little bit of both of us, yeah. But we laugh about it quite a lot. It's every time she doesn't do her laundry, I whip out a dress and say, "How about wearing this today?" Mum.
That's brilliant.
So as we end, I'm going to ask you to summarize Julie Hodges Armstrong in one sentence for me. What would you like the biggest takeaway from today to be?
I think I'd like the biggest takeaway to be, to summarize myself in one sentence would be a girl that always struggled with confidence and never realized the creative gifts that she could share is now entering the world of the internet and developing the confidence to share with all.
Go on, girl.
It's taken me quite a few years, almost 50, to be to this point, but I think the message to remind people is it may be a lengthy journey, but it's as we said, taking a step each day and moving forward.
Thank you, Julie. Now, I'm always really wary of my approach in these sessions, because I'm naturally a happy person, but I'm happy during the sessions because we're hearing stories of people who have fought back with their trauma and they've come out such survivors that it's fabulous. I can't control my excitement when we get to this point. So that's it for another episode this week. Please stay with us and log in and have a look at what we've got for you next week. Thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we'll see you again next week, Survival Warriors. Take care now. And there we have it, another empowering episode of Survival Stories. If you heard something today that resonated with you, please reach out at jackyandfriends.com and download our free PDF. Don't forget to head over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review and rating. And whilst you're online, why not join our community of warriors on Facebook at Survival with Jackie. Look forward to seeing you there.